Hi everyone, Materim here again with another battle, and this one is kind of unusual. It's a team battle. We have the Dwarves teaming with the Beastmen to face Dark Elves teamed with the Ogre Kingdoms, and each of the four armies has 2,250 points in it. So here's our board. A couple things to take note of. The Beastmen and Dwarves are actually being played by one player, and the Dark Elves are being played by one player, and then I'm playing my Ogres. So it's kind of a 2-on-1 battle here. The other thing to take note of is this is the same Beastman army, so apologies again for it being unpainted. He's working on it. And because he hadn't had any chariots up to this point, he's actually borrowing my scrap launcher and my iron blaster to stand in his Tuskor chariots. So that kind of explains that little difference there. So we'll go ahead and get into deployment, starting with the Dwarf Beastmen group. So up on the Temple of Skulls there, we have a Dwarf cannon with the Rune of Forging. Next to that, we have a Tuskor chariot. In front of them are 10 Iron Drakes with full command. Next to that is a Gore herd, 40 men strong, with additional hand weapons and full command. With them are 2 level 2 Bray Shamans to the lore of Shadow. Next to that, we have a unit of 10 Dwarf Thunderers with shields. Behind that is a Gyrocopter. Then we have a unit of 20 Hammerers with full command and the Master Rune of Groth, 1 eye. With them is the Dwarf Lord on Shield Bearers with 3 Runes of Cleaving and the Armor of Boric Beetlebrow. And next to that, we have a unit of 5 Minotaur with full command and additional hand weapon. In that unit is a Gorebull, BSB, many-limbed, additional hand weapon, gnarled hide, ram's horn helm, heavy armor, and... okay, he listed additional hand weapon twice. Behind that is the second Tuskor chariot. And next in the river, which turned out to be a boiling flood, is a unit of 20 Dwarf Warriors with full command, and there is a Runesmith in there with the Master Rune of Balance on him. And behind that, just out of the river, is a Gyro Bomber. And sorry for the blurry picture here, but next to that we have a Gorgon. Then there is a unit of 20 Longbeards with great weapons and full command. In the back there, we have a unit of Bestigor, 19 man strong with full command and the Wailing Banner. His Great Bray Shaman is there, who's a level 4 Lore of the Wild with Talisman of Preservation. And in front of that is a small unit of 10 Ungor Raiders with Musician and Champion. And my Ogres are all nice and tightly packed here on the right side. I'll go from right to left here. I have Chew the Giant, then a unit of 2 Saber Tusks. Up front is a unit of 3 Iron Guts with full command. Behind them is a unit of 8 Ogre Bulls with full command and a Lookout Noblar. In that group is Tok'ran Face Crusher, my Tyrant, with the armor of Silvered Steel and the Greedy Fist. Then there is Gat the Old, my Battle Standard Bearer with no upgrades. And Chog the Toothy, my level 3 Slaughtermaster with the Lore of Great Maw and the Charm Shield. Inside the little fenced enclosure, you have another 3-man Ogre Bull unit with full command. Behind them is Vaprok Farwanderer, my Hunter on Stonehorn, and he has the Noblar Thief Stone, which ended up netting him the Ruby Ring of Ruin as well. Then I have another 2 units of Saber Tusk next to the building, and then behind that is a Thunder Tusk. And my Dark Elf ally is a little bit more spread out. You can see hiding behind the building is a Reaper Bolt Thrower. He's planning on moving in there turn 1. Next to that is a unit of 30 Witch Elves. In there is the Cauldron of Blood with his Death Hag Battle Standard Bearer on top of it. And that has the Standard of Discipline on it for some strange reason. Behind that is Marathi, the Hag Sorceress, and he went full-on Shadow with her spells. Next is a unit of 5 Harpies. Behind them is a unit of 20 Sisters of Slaughter with full command and the Wailing Banner. Next to that, in the forest, is a unit of 10 Dark Shards with only Musician. And I believe he has a level 2 Sorceress. Lore of Dark Magic, I think, is within the Sisters of Slaughter there. I think it's the one painted model in the Sisters of Slaughter unit in the back. And again, sorry for the blurry picture. It's always difficult to take photos in these team games when you're basically trying to climb over your opponent to get photos. But next to the Dark Shards, there's another 5-man unit of Harpies, a unit of 5 Dark Riders on the hill with Musician, and behind them is the second of the Reaper Bolt Throwers. And then, barely seen on the edge there, he has a Bloodrack Medusa. So, Dark Elves and Ogres got first turn, and on this right flank, I just bring everything up very, very aggressively. I know with putting so many monsters in my army, I'm very vulnerable to that cannon he has sitting all the way on the other side of the board, and there's nothing I can really do other than to be in combat so he doesn't get pot shots off of me, and hopefully the Dark Elves will provide more tempting targets than I do. So, as you can see, I really want to get some monster-on-monster action here. So I'm hoping to Frenzy bait out his Gorgon and let me throw some stuff into it with the Saber Tusks there. And everything else is just ready to react to him as he comes forward, because I know I can't reach it this turn. I am holding my big brick of Ogres back a little bit just because the terrain that you can barely see in the bottom right corner is an Elven Waystone. So right where Chog is right now, he's getting a +1 to channel. So I kind of want that. Hopefully I can get some buffs off before we actually slam into each other up front here, because I did get Troll Guts, and that would make me very, very happy to be able to pull that off. Here in the center, my Dark Elf ally is not quite as aggressive. He doesn't really seem to be willing to commit his large blocks yet, but he does start moving up the witches, although he doesn't want to run them through that lake, which is part of the burning flood. He does bring his Dark Riders and the Harpies up on the right side, because he wants that cannon. He doesn't want him to be shooting at the Cauldron of Blood, which I absolutely agree with, and it moved the other ones into the small forest there, which turned out to be a poison forest, which really isn't going to matter a huge deal. And here's just a better look at where those Harpies ended up. I think he ended up losing a Harpy to dangerous terrain when he landed there. But you see, he's coming up real strong on that cannon, and the Dwarf Beastmen don't really have a whole lot of defenses for it right there, except for those Iron Drakes and the Tuskagore Chariot that's behind them. And here you see the Bloodrack Medusa and the Dark Riders are following up the Harpies. Just in case the Harpies can't get the job done on the cannon, he wants some other options. And if he can sneak the Medusa and the Dark Riders behind the Dwarf Beastman line here, that would be a good way to start putting pressure on their left flank as well. So the Dwarves stopped all our magic, and our shooting was pretty much non-existent. So we end the turn, and the Boiling Flood ends up killing about half of the Dwarf Warriors in this unit. And at this point, the Dwarf player got kind of pissed off at that, and basically said, "Screw those guys." And I think he jumps out with the character that's in there next turn, but he just leaves the rest of the dwarves to burn to death and drown in the river, because really, against what's coming on the right flank, 8 dwarves just aren't going to cut it, and he knows it. I probably would have pulled them back. It may have taken a little while, but if he could have saved at least one, we wouldn't have gotten the points for it. So I think that's probably where I would have gone if I were in his shoes. So Dwarf Beastman turn 1, he manages to get a long bomb charge with the Tuskagore Chariot up over the edge of the hill, does not fail his dangerous terrain, and slams into the front of the Harpies. I took one look at this and I'm like, yeah, those harpies are going to die a horrible freaking death. And speaking of long bomb charges, the Gorgon just hauls ass and slams right into the front of the Iron Guts. Um, I'm pretty nervous here. The Gorgon is going to do a lot of damage, probably going to kill the Iron Gut unit, break them, and run them down. And actually, what he did first is he tried charging the bull unit that was inside the fence. I fled with them, so they're now behind the Stonehorn, and he redirected and landed here. If I get lucky, I'm thinking if he doesn't kill all three of them, I can get a couple of wounds off with those great weapons and get ready for him to overrun into my big pseudo-y Death Star that I have behind him. And I'm thinking my characters can probably handle him if I can get a couple of wounds off him here. So I'm not overly worried at the moment. And here's where you see his Rudensmith jumps out of the unit and runs for safe ground while letting all of his fellows die a horrible death. Not sure how dwarven that is, but it certainly is stubborn having the dwarves just sit there in the water and try and ignore the fact that it's boiling the flesh from their bones. And here in his center, he sends the gyrocopter after the Furies, or the Harpies, which should be no surprise to anyone, and brings up his Hammerer unit just a little bit. He's really hoping for a countercharge into the flank of those witches once they start moving around the lake. And here's just a better shot of him bringing the gyrocopter to go hunt the Harpies in the forest. And over here on the right, he knows that I'm coming for him, so he's moving up pretty aggressive as well. He wants to get the archers up on top of the hill so he can shoot at the cats and maybe even the giant, hopefully to get rid of some of those so he can get his bigger units into something that matters. So we managed to shut the Beastmen down during magic. During shooting, the gyrocopter just absolutely liquefies this unit of Harpies, which is no huge surprise to anybody except perhaps the Harpies. And then, in a huge upset, a laser-guided cannonball flies directly into the Witch Elves, kills two of them, and the Death Hag BSB off of the back of the Cauldron of Blood. The Cauldron itself succeeds its ward save, so it doesn't take any damage, but he did one-shot and kill the BSB, which is not good. And then in combat, we have the flub of the century. The Gorgon comes in and only inflicts 2 wounds on the Iron Guts. So I end up throwing, I think I get 4 wounds back on him, and yeah. So everybody sticks, but it was just a total upset. He really needed to come in and crush face there and just failed to do so. So over here, again, not doing as great as I thought he was going to. The Tuskor Chariot kills 2 of the Harpies. The Harpies don't do anything back, and they turn and flee. But everybody rolls very, very crappy for their flee results, and this is where everything ends up. Which is just a little mind-boggling that the Harpies are still there. So we go into Ogre Dark Elf turn 2, and it's time for some charging. I send Chew into the Hammerers. I send my Saber Tusks into the the Ungors. I'm pretty sure the Saber Tusks can chew up some Ungors. I'm not as certain with the giant combat, but I definitely think doing as much damage to that Longbeard unit as I can is definitely going to be helpful to me. And over here, the Witch Elves attempt to charge just a stupidly long bomb charge into that large gore herd back there and fail. So this is where I end up. And actually that die tells me I was wrong last turn. It looks like the Cauldron of Blood did take a single wound from the cannonball last turn. Oh, and we remembered now that his dwarf unit needed to take burns from last turn, so he ends up killing all but 3 of them in the boiling flood at this point. Okay, so over here on this side, I move up the saber tusks to redirect the minotaurs when they come charging across the river. I move up the stone horn with the hunter on it so I can charge the side of those long beards if they're still there next turn. And then I bring up the thunder tusk so that the gorgon is within its 6-inch range, so he'll have always strikes last. I'm hoping the gorgon and the iron guts will just kill each other this turn, and I did manage to rally my 3 ogres. Over here on this side, Marathi hides behind the witch elves again, and the Sisters of Slaughter move up a little bit. Now, I haven't talked about those dark shards in the forest because that forest is a stupid forest, and they've failed every leadership test for stupidity so far, so they're just kind of diddling around in the woods right now. So our shooting was nothing, but in Magic I did manage to get Troll Guts off on the Iron Gut unit. So I actually fluffed my attacks this turn and didn't kill the Gorgon, but he only killed the one Iron Gut that had only a single wound left on him. The others are still alive and regened, and they fled through my Ogre group, and he pursued and slammed right into the front of them. So this is still okay for me. Over here, last turn, the two groups just kind of fluffed at each other, but he gets 1 wound through on a saber tusk, and I kill 2 of the Ungors at this point. And then my giant just totally fluffs as well. He picked up and ate the champion from the Longbeards, and then killed a single model with a Thunder Stomp result of 1. And then he took 2 wounds, so I lost the combat, but Giants are stubborn leadership 10, so I'm not going anywhere at this point. And at the end of the turn, 2 more of the Dwarves boil away, so there is the champion from that Dwarf unit still sitting there in the boiling flood. So, Dwarf Beastmen turn. Obviously, the Minotaurs with the Doom Bowl come slamming into the Saber Tusks. Now, the nice thing about it, and it doesn't really look like it on this picture, but we measured it, he's going to hit, destroy, and overrun here, and he's not going to come anywhere close to touching anything else. So he's going to be there pretty much all by his lonesome, so I can turn around and deal with him when I need to. Over here, I didn't mention last turn, the Harpies rallied. So the Tuskgore Chariot didn't even take them out. He ends up slamming this turn, charging into the front of the Dark Riders, and the only reason my partner here didn't choose to flee is going from center to center, the Dark Riders would have almost certainly fled off the table, so he's hoping for another fluff there. Everything here just comes up. The Beastman player needs to get some stuff in. You notice his gyro bomber has flown behind his lines. That's because I was using what shooting I had up to this point to try and shoot at it and completely failed. So he wanted to pull back and get it in a safer position so he could be more reactionary with it. But he's hoping the Witch Elves will come charge in, and then he'll get the flank charge. During shooting, the gyro bomber comes over here and blows up 2 of the harpies. I think his blow scattered pretty bad. Oh no, he didn't drop the bomb. He just came over and shot him. So the harpies are still there. They, again, strangely pass their leadership for the panic there and don't go fleeing off the table. So we managed to stop his magic again, so I didn't mention it. But here he crushed face on the Saber Tusks as pretty much expected. But because the Minotaurs only stumble forward like a D6 when they overrun, he's sitting there out in the middle of nothing. And his character there is on the right. I threw all my attacks into it, hoping to get some wounds through, and I failed to do so. Over here, I ate 3 more of the Ungors, and the Ungors killed one of the Saber Tusks, so there's definitely a big bloody fight going on there. I'm a little less certain of how it's going to turn out now, but it's really not important. It's chaff on chaff, and it's really not the big point value battles that are going on this side, so I don't really care one way or the other. And then over here, Tok'ran steps up and shows the Gorgon what for. Just chews him up. And there's really nothing the Gorgon was going to do against my Tyrant, particularly being that he already had several wounds on him. So we end up killing him there, which is definitely good. That gives me a way to run up with the Thunder Tusk and the Stonehorn there and start throwing around more Always Strikes Last into the fights that are going on in that back corner. So I'm pretty happy with that. And over here, the Beastmen players' luck finally turns back to the realm of normal, and he manages to just crush face on the Dark Riders. They broke and he caught them. So he's got one of those chariots behind the front lines now, and is looking hungrily at that bolt thrower who has been trying and failing to kill his cannon for a turn and a half at this point. Over here, I did a couple more wounds with the giant, but took took a total of 5 for my trouble. So the giant's on one last wound, but he is going to hold, which is really what I wanted, because next turn it's going to let me get my hunter on the Stonehorn in there, and that's pretty much going to wipe up that Longbeard unit, I think. So we go into Ogre turn, and exactly what I said happened. The Thunder Tusk got a charge on to assist the Saber Tusk there, and the Stonehorn Hunter slams into the side of the Iron Guts. It's going to be a bad day for them, because they're going to take a lot of impact hits, and then I've got a character on top who's just going to chew up his Runesmith that's there, and it's going to be a bad day. Now, over here, I throw up my 3 Ogre Bulls to target, or to basically frenzy bait his Minotaurs. What's going to happen is he's going to hit and kill them, overrun just a little bit, and end up with a flank charge from my big unit of Ogres and a front charge from the 2 remaining Iron Guts. And I'm pretty sure that's just going to delete that Minotaur unit unless his Doom Bull pulls some crazy shit. Then over here in the center, the Witch Elves just say, screw it, we don't care if we get flank charged by Dwarves. Those Beastmen need to die, and slam straight forward into that unit, which I'm interested to see what's going to happen here. I've only seen the Witch Elves a couple times, and we're still pretty new with the Beastmen, so I was kind of unsure what this would turn into. Over here, he slams his Medusa into the Gyro Bomber, which is basically running defensive line for the cannon, and manages to slam that one last Harpy into the cannon itself. At this point, he's hoping, just because he goes first, that he'll do a wound or 2 on it, but he's pretty sure the cannon crew is going to kill him. And then over here, he brings up the Sisters of Slaughter, so that if the Dwarves do flank charge the Witches, he'll be able to flank charge the Dwarves, and has Morathi behind them to provide magical assistance. So the big news in the magic phase is that Morathi got Mindrazor off on the Witch Elves, so they're going to be just a terrible force to be reckoned with. But that was all our magic. We went into close combat, and the Thunder Tusk and the Saber Tusk obviously eat that unit of Ungors. Thunder Tusk slams forward, or overruns and slams into the Bestigor unit, which is actually nice because it brings the Dwarves that are fighting my giant into Always Strikes Last territory. Well, actually, they might have already had it, because I think they're great weapons. So, immaterial, but otherwise, definitely a good win, and now the Beastigor unit is held down, and they're not going to be able to run off or do anything of their own. And then Chew obviously gave his life so that we could crush Dwarves, and the Stonehorn overruns, slams into the side of the Bestigors, and it's just going to be a nasty, nasty day for those Bestigors in that level 4. Because they got a lot of monsters to deal with, and that's not going to be very much fun. Then over here, the Harpy does 2 wounds to the Dwarf cannon, and the Dwarf cannon crew, the last remaining one, does not manage to kill it, so they're stuck on each other there. And the Medusa and the Gyro Bomber basically trade wounds. The Gyro Bomber took 2, the Medusa took 1. And with Occams on them, the Witch Elves became an absolute blender. They inflicted 38 wounds to the Gore unit, which killed them to a man. The only thing left were the 2 level 2 wizards. There, they obviously broke and ran for the table edge. They're actually not going to rally, and I think next turn they'll run off the table edge. But it was brutal. I mean, it was absolutely terrifying. The Dwarf Beastmen player was pissed. But he was a good fella, knew that we were doing this for a battle report, so he agreed to stick it in, wasn't going to give up, and was just going to kill as many of the dirty knife ears as he possibly could. So we'll see how successful he is with that. So we go into Dwarf Beastman turn, and his Minotaurs charge into my Ogres pretty much as I expected. He really didn't have much in the way of choice here, as he realizes that this game is pretty much over for him already. He just wants to kind of get what points he can, and he knows he has no real choice but to eat the trap that I'm setting for him here with the counter charge. Then over here, the Tuskgore Chariot fails a charge into the Reaper Bolt Thrower, so he ends up right there at the edge of the hill. And then over here, he brings his Gyrocopter around to start roasting Witch Elves. As he's pretty much learned his lesson, he does not want to engage them in combat, so he's going to do his best with the Iron Drakes and the Gyro Bomber just to melt as many of the little bitches as he can. He's also working his Tuskgore Chariot around here through the gap so he can come and get the Sisters of Slaughter and hopefully claim the points for them as well. So I think this is the shooting. He peels off another 5 or 6 of the witches. So they're only down to, I think they're down to 2 or 3 ranks at this point. So not entirely a bad thing. I think the big problem now with the cannon tied up is how is he going to deal with the cauldron itself. But we'll see how that works out. He has no real magic. So we go into combat. As predicted, he ended up just absolutely beating the tar out of the Ogres. However, his character ended up getting 3 wounds on him. I'm not even sure how. Maybe it was from shooting? I don't know, but his BSB has 3 wounds on it before I even slam into him with the other fights, so it's bad. Over here, he puts 4 wounds on my Thunder Tusk, 1 on the Stonehorn, and I managed to kill his his general. I think it was in a challenge with the hunter there, and the rest of the Bestigors are just getting beat. I'm pretty sure they break and get run down at this point, but I don't think I have a picture for that. Over here, the Harpy is still fighting the cannon, and the Medusa does finally kill the Gyro Bomber. And I'm sorry, here the Tuskgore Chariot did actually succeed its charge into the Bolt Thrower. We just didn't put it on the hill because this model is old and metal and it falls apart easy, so I didn't want it falling off the hill. So he kills it, reforms over here to the back of the Dark Shards, who have just stupid stumbled themselves all the way out of the woods finally. So we go into Dark Elf Ogre turn, and it's a bad day for Minotaurs. I succeeded both charges. I'm going to slam into him like a world of hurt here, and I don't imagine that his Minotaur unit will be surviving it. And again, I made a mistake. The Bestigor unit did not break last turn. They were still stubborn. So I slam my last remaining Saber Tusk in there on the corner to add a few more attacks. Then over here, he charges the Witch Elves into the Iron Drakes. They either choose to flee or fail a terror check. I don't quite remember which one. I don't even know if the cauldron has terror. Yes, it does. So yeah, they failed a terror check, which was stupid. It's leadership 10, and ended up getting run down. So the cauldron hit here and turned around and reformed. We end up from shooting the bolt thrower that's in the tower that hasn't done anything all game, manages to finally get a lucky shot on the gyrocopter and kills it in a single blow. And here the Bestigors do manage to kill the Saber Tusk, but they don't do any other wounds, and my two monsters tear them apart and eat them for dinner. So they turn around to face the Minotaur battle that's in that bottom corner. And over here, the Minotaurs do put up a good fight. They end up killing one Ogre and putting a wound on another. Killed one of the two Iron Guts and put a wound on the last one. But there's just too many Ogres and too many characters there for the Minotaurs to deal with. So they die. I overrun to here so that if the dwarves and the sisters get mixed up, I can charge across the burning lake and slam into the side of them. Over here, the cannon finally dies to the harpy and the Medusa. So we did finally take points for it. So then we go into the dwarf Beastmen turn. The Tuskegore chariot charges down at the dark shards, fails its dangerous terrain test, and takes 6 wounds and kills itself. Here, the hammerers and the last Tuskegore chariot slam into the front of the Sisters of Slaughter, hoping to kind of get some last-minute points. We'll see how that turns out. Alright, so here things just go bad for the dwarves. I think they kill 1, maybe 2 of the Sisters of Slaughter and take 6 dead in return. So it just went really bad for them. Everybody sticks, but at this point, he sees my Ogre brick coming up from the side and realizes that he just doesn't have the tools to handle what's left on the board, and so the Beastmen and the Dwarves surrender at what I believe is bottom of turn 5. And here is just an overall look of the board as it ends. As you can see, all he really has left there is the small unit of Thunderers and what's in that combat. And the Witch Elves are going to come in, my Ogres are going to come in. It's pretty much a done deal at this point. So I completely agree with our opponent's choice to surrender the game at this point. Alright, so obviously with the surrender of the other team, it was a victory for the Dark Elves and the Ogre Kingdoms. I thought it was a very interesting game. As far as my list goes, this is the first time I've really tried an Ogre Kingdoms Monster Mash, and when you're not dealing with a whole lot of cannons on the other side, it's actually pretty effective. The one thing that made me nervous with this particular list is at 2,250 points, with that many monsters, I really didn't have enough points to gear up my characters like I usually like. So I had to play a lot more conservatively with the bigger group of ogres than I usually do. You'll notice that I stayed in the back for most of the fight and didn't really throw them in until I had set up that perfect chance against the Minotaurs. Other than that, I let the monsters do the heavy lifting, which was the point of the list, so I consider it very successful. I don't necessarily know if it would have been as successful in a one-on-one game, because I think the Dark Elves made a good target for a lot of the stuff I was concerned about. So I didn't really have to worry about cannon shots and that sort of thing. As far as my partner's Dark Elf list, wow, are the Witch Elves busted as shit. Particularly when you throw Occams on, and I know Occams makes any unit good, but oh my god, with all the rerolls, the always strikes first, the rerolls to wound, the double frenzy spell thing from the cauldron, I mean, it was just abusive. I mean, they did 38 wounds to the freaking toughness 4 dudes. I mean, it was brutal. I know it very much pissed off the dwarf beastman player, and it may very well lead to a group comp of not being able to take witch elves and shadow magic in the future together. I think we all talked about it after the game, and we kind of agreed that the witch elves they're super strong by themselves, but when you throw Occams on them, it just gets ridiculous. So we may just make a gentleman's agreement amongst everyone not to do that again. As far as our opponents list, the Beastmen. What can I say? This opponent that we play, the Dwarf Beastman opponent, is really the only one in our group that uses hordes to any significance. And I think he kind of over relies on them. Now, maybe the argument is that the Beastmen need the hordes, but he does the same thing in his dwarves most of the time, too. And I think it ends up making it very easy to counter his army when all he's got are these big bricks, and I think that's what ended up happening here is he wasn't able to get them in effectively, and by the time he did, it was too little too late. In general, I think he could have benefited from more artillery, but I think that's a truism of the dwarves all the time. I love the dwarves, and I think they can be fun to play, but they're very, very hard to make a combat army out of, mainly because it becomes much more difficult for you to choose the kind of fights that the dwarves can excel at. Your opponent gets to be a lot more proactive, and it just becomes harder to win. So all in all, I thought it was a pretty good matchup. I definitely think that the deck was a little stacked in our favor, and that showed up in how the game went out. But I was very pleased tactically how I did. I think it. I didn't make any big mistakes that I saw, and none that my opponent capitalized on. So that made me very happy. And all in all, it was a fun game. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Please like, subscribe, comment as required. And we'll go ahead and catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.